Rip the fig tree down. It's not bearing any fruit.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. Disgrazia.
They will not allow Donald Trump to be president. This is the twisted mind of the left. You're putting a Band-Aid over a problem that's not being addressed. It's thrown around too liberally, hate speech. Just because your feelings are hurt doesn't mean it's hate speech. So there are issues here that cross political lines.
It means that your libtard friends are not going to invite you over for Grey Goose and Pavois.
If you think that America is about you, you're just fooled.
I got to show you something that has me aggravated. Welcome back, everyone, to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. It's Sunday night. Let us go into the breach, and it's freaking weird. I mean, Joe, I don't know how to describe it. And we're going to show a few clips tonight. It's like you say to yourself like this. I mean, Joe, look, once in a while, people say, well, things are really weird out there. Things are really strange. Jim Morrison, back in the day, wrote a song, People Are Strange. Joe, are we crazy? It's so, like, I don't know. I look at some of this stuff and I say, yeah, it's freaking weird. Joe, please chime in, because I'm starting to question my own sanity. You know, Joe, they say when you hear things often enough, you start to believe it, even though in your heart you know it's a lie, okay? And we hear things often enough that we bash gay people. Don't you know that? Joe, you and I, we perpetrate violence against transgender people. You hear that stuff often enough, and the left knows this, Joe, by the way. That works on a lot of people. That works. Now, I'm exaggerating a little bit to make a point. We have to do what they do, Joe. Our mantra has to be the truth, the truth, the truth, the truth, the truth, over and over and over again. Men can't be women. Women can't be men. All of it, over and over and over again. Because guess what, Joe? That's what they're doing. And the world is just getting weirder and weirder and weirder. Joe, help me here, please.
Well, I would say people aren't anchored. I mean, like, if you're anchored in some semblance of right and wrong, you don't buy into this. And I'll be honest with you, most people don't. If you talk to like the average person, like on the street, they don't. But to your point, it is weird. And I'm going to take it to another level. I actually think it's evil. I've said this to my wife recently. This is not political anymore. I was listening
way beyond that.
It's beyond political. It's evil. It really is. I'm sorry. And I listened to a gentleman on Larry Elder. I like Larry Elder.
Larry Elder's cool, yeah.
It was Everett, I think his name is. Well, anyway, he has a documentary out, and he was basically premiering it, and he basically said, you can't vote for the Democrats if you believe in Christ. He was basically like he wasn't Catholic. He was basically saying, like, if you have a belief in God, we'll call it that, you can't vote for the. And you know something, Joe, he's right.
Joe, let me throw one step further. Let me bring it to one different level, because obviously what we try to do here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe, of course, our main concern and the reason why Joe and I do this show is we'd like to show people what we like to think. Catholic men getting into the breach, rolling up our sleeves, getting into the fight. We want to evangelize people. We want people to come into the church. However, and that's the most important thing. So I'm not saying and we also want to live in an orderly society. Now, we interviewed E. Michael Jones, okay, remember? So he wrote the book, Logos Rising. Joe, even those people who are not Catholic and Christian, who don't accept, let's say, Jesus as the Logos incarnate, but Joe, nonetheless, they know it too. They agree with us on these things. Like, take an Orthodox Jewish parent, okay? That guy doesn't want his son to come home and say, Daddy, I think I'm a girl.
Joe, Democrats too.
A lot of Democrats got to say to themselves, Where is my party? Like, Joe, the problem too is the media. We'll get into that in a little bit. Is that we always hear the narrative of, oh, the Republican Party left me because they supported Donald Trump. Okay, but what about the 22 million Democrats for life out there? Your party left you a long time ago because you guys say that you're pro-life and you're against abortion. They're in favor of abortion now after the baby's born, which is obviously, it's always murder, but now it's even more so murder after the baby's born. My point to you, Joe, is that what we are trying to do here, and I think is the most important thing if we actually love our country, is to emphasize logos, order, rationality, reason. Because quite frankly, Joe, we're going to cover a couple of topics that you say reason and rationality are lost.
Well, I agree.
Logos is out
Joe,
the window.
I'll be honest with you. I think getting back to the evil part, that just disqualifies people. Like you can't, that's what this guy Everett was getting to on Larry
Mhm.
Elder. You're disqualified. Like if you are for some of the things that we're going to talk about today, you're disqualified. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, if you want to lop the breasts of a 14-year-old girl off, you're fine without the consent of their parents, you're disqualified. I can't vote for you. If I believe, we'll just call it in a higher power, I can't vote for you.
Right.
Sorry, you're disqualified. And this is where I'll be honest with you, people don't care because they're not grounded in truth. No, there is no more right and wrong, Joe. There is no more right and wrong.
Joe, listen, I grow up, or excuse me, I live in Arizona. A lot of conservatives here, Joe. A lot of Republicans here. And you want to know what I could experience? Again, I'm not judging them, but I'm just telling you the way it is. This is anecdotal. This is from my point of view. I'm in a business where I talk to a lot of different people. The Republicans and conservatives I talk to, they don't want to hear about abortion. They don't want to hear about transgenderism. They honestly don't want to hear about it. They're just concerned about effing money. We want free markets and beat China. That's it. They don't care about pro-life. They don't care about boys being girls and girls being boys. They vote Republican because they are the problem in the Republican Party. And that's what we're dealing with. They're not interested in the culture war, Joe. And that's a shame because the culture war is what's shaping the politics, and they're too freaking blind to see it.
Well, that's the truth. Like I said, I mean, my wife this week. It's funny you bring that up. My kids have allergies. So what's the allergy medication? If you said it like it's like over the counter.
I'm
Well,
not.
anyway, if
I'm
you
not
said
sure.
it, 20 pills, $40 in the pharmacy. And I said to her, I'm like, you see, that's gouging, and there should be a law against that. But Republicans will never allow that. You
That's
see,
right. That's right.
and that's where they're wrong. Like that feeds into to the liberal narrative where that's wrong.
Right.
And like, but that's how people roll. That's gouging and taking advantage of people. And ultimately, that's where the Republicans, they don't get it either.
Well, that's why we say, Joe, listen, that's why the Republican Party might be able to, for a little bit, stave off the inevitable. The inevitable is coming. America is coming to an end. Now, what do we mean by that? Okay. Joe and I like history. We know a little bit about history. Rome came to an end. Did the world end when Rome came to an end? No, no. There was a transition in the society from one structure to another. That's what's going to happen in America. It's going to transition from one structure to another. Our Constitution is gone. Okay. Well, our Constitution has been gone ever since conservatives decided to abandon the Constitution to the left. They let the left have their way for however many years. The conservatives buried their heads in the sand. And what do you think is going to happen when you abandon your founding document? You're going to come to an end. All right. But the world's going to transition. America's going to transition. We'll see how that ends up. But here's one thing. The problems, Joe, will still persist. Now, let's talk about the main problem. Our Lady of Fatima said the final attack between Satan and the Church of Christ will be on marriage and the family. Okay. Well, what is the greatest attack on the family right now is transgenderism. And the fact that parents aren't allowed to be parents by the ruling elite that St. Paul in the Ephesians called the spiritual darkness and the spiritual wickedness in high places. Yeah, I'm getting scriptural tonight, Joe Restinello. Okay. Because when you try to say from your high place that children need to be taught about that boys could be girls and girls could be boys, you're evil. You represent the spiritual evil that St. Paul is talking about. Okay. You're not just somebody who's a sinner. We are all sinners. You want to propose and enforce and promote that sin to young children. So let's watch this clip of this, I guess, teacher, counselor, whatever she is, talking about keeping this stuff from parents, Joe Restinello.
Shocking undercover video that was released yesterday by Project Veritas, and frankly, it confirmed what many of us suspected.
We do have patients who are starting as young as 8, 9, so we do have folks on the younger side.
Joe, what the F is on the other side of 8 or 9 or 10 years old? 5, 6, 7? And then what are we supposed to do? We got our church telling us, oh, don't be so judgmental. You're bringing sin to little children who are below the age of reason. They do not know what the hell they're talking about. Joe, come on. How many girls you grew up with at 5, 6, 7 years old, 8 years old were tomboys? How many boys were a little bit effeminate? And then by the time they got to puberty, you know what? They grew up. The boys realized they were boys, and the girls got breasts and started to menstruate. And guess what? They realized, oop, I'm a girl. This is the way it goes. These evil people are taking advantage. That's what this woman just said. Well, you know, we have kids on the other side. Joe, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to hand it over to you, or else I'm just going to lose my mind.
No, it's people are twisted. Joe, it comes down to they're not grounded. I mean, and there are people that buy into this. And to be truthful with you, it's only going to get worse. I mean, one of the stories I was looking for a clip for, which I couldn't find, the UN put forth some information this past week. I invite people to look it up, which is basically lessening or the call to lessen the laws for men that have sex with adults that have sex with children.
I heard about that.
So I'm not making this up either, guys. Right. So look it up. So this is the UN. So I mean, that's what's next. Like they're not grounded in anything. It's twisted and it's frigging unbelievable. But this is what's going on. The world has gone mad because, frankly, Joe, the world has forgotten about God. It all comes down to that. You have to have an anchor in your life. When you don't have an anchor, all bets are off. People start going in crazy directions. They get lost. And it doesn't matter how smart you are. Like you could be a doctor. You could go to Harvard. There's some of the worst. And to be honest with you, my deal is this. Listen, it's sad. You watch people destroy themselves. You watch them it's a tragedy is what it is.
But the tragedy is for those people, Joe. You see, we get look at that girl. I think her name is Chloe Cole, right? She was mutilated. Now she's suing the doctors now. She's been on Tucker and everything else. She is who we have to champion. She is a young girl who is convinced by doctors that she should transition. Her parents, God bless them, they just didn't know what to do. And Joe, there is a case on the part of parents here, and I'm going to be very, very charitable for ignorance. Some of these parents don't know what to do with their 13 or 14-year-old girl who says, I want to be a boy.
Well, what they say, the line that's given to them is this. Do you want, like if it's a girl, you want a dead girl or do you want a boy, a son that's alive? That's the doctors basically coerce parents.
Joe, that's why we have to make sure that we support Chloe Cole, because what she's doing, because in her lawsuit, she's going to, when she wins, I'm not even going to say if she wins, when she wins, those doctors are going to realize that if you say that to a parent, guess what? You're going to be legally liable. So you better make sure. See, it's not like, Joe, you go to the doctor and you say, hey, doc, you know, my sciatic hurts. He says, here, I'm going to prescribe a painkiller. okay, to help you with your sciatic. That's legit. You know that the painkiller works. There's scientific base. There is a scientific basis for it. He's prescribing a pill that can help me with my sciatic, so I can go out and I can go to work loading trucks or whatever the case might be. Okay, these guys are trying to pass this off as science, Joe, and medical science when they have no grounding whatsoever. And as you said, what are they doing, Joe? That's what you just described as a political slogan. That's a culture war slogan. That's not a statement of science. Would you rather have a dead daughter than an alive son? Like, that's jargon. That's lies is what it is. She wins her case, Joe. They're not going to be able to do that. And thank God they're not going to be able to do that. Next time they go to open their mouth, you know what they're going to say, Joe? They're going to say, that one might cost me a whole bunch of money. And as Joe Resinello says at the front line with Joe and Joe all the time, money moves the dial. Joe, that's where we got to go then. We got to hit him in the ass with the money.
No doubt about that. People have to basically, but you know something, Joe? Again, people aren't grounded. Like that, like if all of this nonsense would not exist. It really wouldn't. We wouldn't have the political leaders that we have. If we wouldn't have the political support of this. The politicians know that some things are winners and some things are losers. They're tapping in to basically the vibe that's out there. And you talk about conservatives. The reason why the conservatives bury their head is because, frankly, the politicians know that it's not a winner. I'm talking across the states, like you mentioned in Arizona. Just because someone votes for a Republican like ticket, that doesn't mean that they're for traditional marriage. They may not care. That doesn't mean that they're for, say, like life. They could
They're pro-life.
And this is the thing. People aren't grounded and they don't see. And Joe, I'll be truthful with you. I say this all the time. The proof's in the pudding. They're getting bulldozed. That's why society is a wreck.
Joe, let me ask you this. Joe, you and I, a major part of what we believe to be Logos. Again, we're talking about Logos for all of you out there joining us at the front line with Joe and Joe. We're Catholic men. We take St. John seriously when he said, in the beginning there was Logos and the Logos became flesh. However, Logos is something that all people could recognize. It was a concept that came along a long time before Jesus Christ in Greek philosophy, but it's still true. Order, rationality, reason. Joe, the word itself, logic, logos, logic. What is the logical consequence of all this, Joe Resinello? Well, let's play. Here's a mother who I love. I love this woman. You want to know why, Joe? Because as you talk about being grounded, you're right. You're absolutely right. People need to be more grounded in the truth. Sometimes all you got to do is take an argument, take it to its logical extreme. That's what logic is. You take an argument and you logically take it to its extreme and see if it still holds true. Well, we have a clip of a woman. Well, you'll see for yourself. She's dressed a certain way. She wants to identify a certain way. And this is the logic that she's trying to, the illogic that she's trying to point out on the other side. Let's play the clip.
I'm a cat. Meow, meow. I'm not a woman dressed as a cat. I am a cat. By show of hands, I'm curious, how many of you believe and confess that I'm a cat? Great. By show of hands, I'm curious, how many of you believe that your child or a child from this school would believe that I'm actually a cat? No one. You are right. Why? Because you are not stupid, and these children are not stupid. Truth prevails over imagination.
Truth prevails over imagination. Joe, she's just a regular woman. I don't know her. I don't know her background. I could tell just by looking at her. That's just a regular woman there. She took, as a regular woman, probably a mom, an argument that they're making, and she took it to its logical, ridiculous conclusion and shows up at the school board and says, I'm not pretending to be a cat. I'm not dressed as a cat. I am a cat. And it's the same effing thing as when a boy says that he's a girl or a girl says that she's a boy. And she is what we need a little bit more of. What I mean by that, Joe, and I hand it over, common sense. In your face, Common sense, because that's exactly what that clip is all about.
Well,
Common sense.
Well, basically, she's showing how ridiculous that is, and it is ridiculous. But there was also a woman. This happened a while ago. She was basically doing the same thing about the drag stuff, and she dressed up like some of the men do. And she went to the meeting, and it was like really crazy. And she said, "Is this appropriate?" And she was a very attractive woman. She's like, "Is this appropriate for me to wear this in front of kids?" Of course it isn't. Well, why is it okay for a man to do it? And again, it's almost like it puts a mirror in front of people. But you know, Joe, people are afraid to say anything because sadly, like it's the mob, they get shouted down. They're called this, they're called haters. People just have to basically be like, call me whatever you want. Whatever you want, call me whatever you want. I am not for this. This is not healthy. It's not good for kids. And frankly, it's mental. If a child says he or she is a cat, they need help. You're not helping the child to affirm them in that behavior. Nowhere, no time, ever. And again, people, they say they're for kids, they're for this. No, you're not. You're not helping this kid. And
Right.
this is what I'm saying. And it's Joe, it's only going to get worse. I just mentioned the UN thing. That's next. Where it's going to be like that's next. It's going to
They're
be
getting Joe. They're going to get. If you're just joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossinello, we're way in the breach. Please, we never ask you for money, and we're not going to tonight. Maybe in the future. But as it is right now, we ask you to hit a button, a click, a like, a subscribe, a share, a follow. Help us out, Joe. You know where they're going to get their biggest resistance? Again, we're going to go back to it. Uganda, Nigeria, African nations who are rooted, as you were describing earlier. There's that clip of that gentleman from Uganda. He's saying, no LGBT, no abortion. He's in a UN meeting, but he's got that thick African accent. He's basically telling them, we don't want to hear it, man. We don't want to, don't bring LGBT BS into this conversation. Don't bring abortion because we're not going for it. That's why the future of the church, on another note, is in Africa. The future of civilization may be in Africa because Europe's gone. America is about gone. You've done a slew of videos on Trudeau in Canada. Now, let me tell you what, Joe, what's the conservative MP's name? Poviev? Is that it? What's his name?
Pierre Polyev.
Polyev. Okay. He's a sellout too.
He won't speak out. He won't do this conversation.
No, he won't do it. He won't. Now, Maxime Bernier, he'll have this conversation.
Well, actually, I just did a clip on that. He called him out on it. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Again, you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, whoever you are. If you won't speak up against this, you don't deserve to serve. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat because it's wrong. You see, this transcends politics. Joe, it's evil. This is evil.
Straight up.
I don't know what else to say to somebody.
You can't describe this. I mean, Joe, when you look at it on all different levels, what it is they're trying to perpetrate on kids, how they go about it, how they hide it from parents, how they enlist the help of the kid to hide it from the parents, how the teachers' unions are all on board, how the teachers themselves, higher education, the media, Joe, on every single level. That's why I didn't just arbitrarily quote St. Paul earlier when I said Ephesians 6. The reason he wrote that line in Ephesians 6 said, we're not fighting against flesh and blood. Joe, he's really saying, yeah, I'm going to get a little preachy here for a second. He's saying we're not fighting against sinful people, okay? Because we're all sinners. That's flesh and blood. That's what we go through, okay? That's how we struggle through life. We have to struggle against it. What he's talking about is what we're talking about in this conversation, and nobody wants to hear. And the Catholic Church for centuries has had it right. We're fighting against the people that would promote this stuff. There's your spiritual wickedness. And Joe, they're on the right and the left. They're on the right and now, is it predominantly on the left now? Yes, it is. Predominantly. But when you're leftist light and call yourself conservative, well, you're no friend of ours. You're no friend of those who believe in logos in their life, of order and rationality and reason in their families, that boys are boys and girls are girls. You're no friend of ours if you're just leftist light and you say, I'm Nancy Mace, I'm pro-life, I'm from North Carolina. We need to accommodate the left on abortion. No, Nancy, you don't understand. That's the problem. But she calls herself smart. And Joe, the Republican establishment says, you know what? Maybe we should listen to Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace and people like her, Joe, they're the problem. They're just leftist light. That's all they are. They never stand to thwart these people and say, you're on that side, I'm on this side. I'm not meeting you any place in the middle. Nowhere, because there is no middle ground. I'm not doing it.
I know. And what it is, though, they want power.
Of
Again,
course.
because the game is not about truth, like in the political arena. There are people, I'm not saying there aren't some, but for the most part, the game is about power. And they know that some things are winners, particularly in some regions of the country. And people just, because to be honest with you, they have no soul. Like it's about, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to win the election.
Right.
And I know that if I position myself here, I will win. And that's sad. Well, I shouldn't say they have no soul. They're tainting their soul for power. It's sad. I mean, to be truthful with you, and again, look at California. By the way, California, what's happening in California is turning into a South American state. You have uber rich people who basically are going to live behind walls. Their kids are going to go to private schools. They're going to have private security forces, people in neighborhoods. That's what happens in South America. And they'll live perfectly fine. And then you're going to have everybody else basically living in a horrendous environment.
The guy who has overseen that wants to be president of the United
And Joe,
States.
there's a chance he may. You see, that's the sick part. Don't even think like, and there are millions of people that'll vote for him.
Oh, of course.
Millions and millions. California is going to make its way across America as this progresses. Unless something happens that puts a stop to it, an event, a person, I can't.
Joe, I think about that all the time. And it's out of love, not out of hatred that I say this, okay? You want to stop this now. If you're a person who even remotely thinks that a lot of this is nonsense, you want to do something about it now, or at the very least, you want to stand up against it. Because guess what? If you let God intervene, there's going to be a real problem for you. There's going to be a real problem for America. Look, God has brought down the end of civilizations. And I don't care how that sounds to people out there. I don't care how that sounds to atheists and people like that. I don't. God the Father Almighty has dropped the hammer on societies and civilizations when they've gone too far off the rails. Okay? And he will do the same thing to America. You think America's God's? Joe, I got news for some of these evangelical, conservative, Republican Christians in America. Okay, you think God is going to save America? You people won't stand up for anything. You don't stand up for anything. And believe me, Joe, I'm pointing the finger at a lot of Catholics too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not just pointing a finger at a lot of conservative, so-called Christian evangelicals and people like that. I'm pointing a finger at a lot of, like our president. Okay. When God steps in, I'm sorry, you better watch your butt. And I'm not being cheeky about it, because the chastisement is going to be real. It's going to be very real. And you brought it upon yourself because you've rejected truth for so long. Say, well, why can't little Johnny come home and say he's little Janie? Because he's not. Why can't we say that, Joe? Help me, please, Joe.
Well, I mean, I'll be true with you. You have that aspect, but I'm just talking about quality of life issues too.
Well, but that obviously is a big part of it.
Oh,
Even those
no
people who don't believe in God. Is this a society you want?
I mean, you could use Canada as an example. I mean, dude, people can't buy food.
Right.
They can't buy food. It's so expensive, the inflation. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. California, that quality of life, that's what goes on. See, Americans are spoiled. Like in parts of the world, that's how it rolls. The 3% of the society lives extraordinarily well. The rest of the society is in the mud.
Right.
And you're not, and here's another thing, you don't get out of the mud. You're born in the mud, you stay in the mud, you die in the mud, unless you're in that 3%. You don't go to college. There's no chance of college. I talked to, like on my job, just to throw like some ideas, like to give you a perspective. Um, a woman was talking about her country. I'm not going to tell. It's in South America, and she said she went to law school. 30,000. She's like, it's free. And always Americans always point to these, oh, college is free. It's free. Everything's paid for. Yes. 30,000 people apply for 300 seats.
It's a joke.
30,000 people apply for 300 seats.
And
Are
you know where
you
those 30,000, the rest of the 27,000 or
driving
29,000,
they're
they're
driving
going to be the ones
cabs.
cleaning the toilets.
That's right. And that's what people don't get. Like in these countries, and that's what's going on. We're seeing the very beginning of it in California, and that's going to sweep right across the nation. You talked about a change, a fundamental change in what's happening. That's what's happening.
Right.
The country might exist, but it's going to exist in a way that it's just not going to work for regular people. Brazil exists. Paraguay exists. It's just a misery for a large swath of the population, and just the rest live extraordinarily well. And that's what's going to happen in
Right.
America. It's
No.
happening
Listen.
already.
Well,
I'm not
listen.
making this up.
No.
Talk to people in LA. Talk to people in San Francisco.
But brother, here's the thing though, Joe. Like they brought it upon themselves. If you're just joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossinello, we are way in the breach. We ask you wherever you see us on social media, whether you're watching this on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, please follow us on Twitter. We're building up our audience there. We're new to the game on Twitter. We're doing very well so far. Please do all that. Joe, there has to be, it seems at some point, there are sometimes, let me ask you this. I'm going to pose a question. I'm not going to make a statement. Part of me says that there's many good people in the world that recognize what we recognize. I think there's more of us than there are of them. They might have more money and seemingly more power, but if we came together in a unified way, we could perhaps push back against them. That's group number one. The other two is that people just don't give a damn. And that's the world we live in. We're so far into a post-Christian society that all morals and boundaries are gone. And everybody's attitude is, as long as it doesn't affect me, I don't care what you do, not realizing that what you do does have an effect on society. I'm torn, Joe. I'm torn between the two sides. Sometimes I believe people are just too far gone and that God's going to have to intervene. And God always intervenes, by the way. On the other side, there are more of us who just lack power, who need a kind of a voice that's going to bring us together. We'd love for that voice to be Jesus Christ, but in the earthly realm, a leader, an authentic leader of some kind that's going to bring people together to fight against this nonsense. And I'm going to be honest, Joe, I don't know which way I'm leaning right now. I tend to be more pessimistic. I just think people don't give a crap.
I think
do.
it's got to get worse. Like where again, and it will. Like financially, see, people understand money. Like when you can't eat. Like in Canada right now, I've seen some statistics whereby a large swath of Canadians are going to food banks to basically live. They
It's
can't buy.
Canada. It's
This is what I'm
Canada.
saying. They
It's
can't
just-
buy food. And this is where, again, it has to come to that. Like, the transgender thing and the same-sex marriage thing and the abortion thing, if you're an Orthodox Jew, if you're a Catholic and you have eyes to see, you see how that trickles down into a lot of different issues in the society. Most people don't have eyes to see, but what they do understand is when they can't buy food. They can't buy food. It's too expensive. And then things could change, to your point. Like if you start getting like California, it's 13%, I think, is the state tax on everything.
Oh,
California,
unbelievable.
dude, California is unlivable for regular people. Now, if you're a billionaire, you might just say, who cares? I love it
Right.
here. The
Well, that's
weather's
what they
nice.
do in New Jersey. You got multimillionaires living in the richest parts of New Jersey. They make millions of dollars. They don't care if their house has 30, 40, $50,000 in property tax. They pay it. They don't
That's
care.
my point. I
Yeah.
mean, like, so that's what I mean. Like people, but that's not everybody. It's got to get worse. And then we'll see where it goes,
Well,
where
then bring it
people,
on. Then my
where
attitude,
people could step up and they could just say, listen, we can't do this anymore.
well,
This
then,
is,
then listen, Joe, then bring it on. Then my attitude is
well,
this. Look,
I think it's going to happen.
well, it's
And
already
like,
here. I mean, let's face it. I mean, we do stories at the front line with Joe and Joe all the time. People getting arrested, thrown out of libraries that they pay taxes to support because they want to voice their opinion on drag queen story hours. If a parent goes to a what do you call the board of education meeting, the school board meeting, and yells at them because they hid the fact that the father's daughter was raped by a boy pretending to be a girl. They're arrested. Merrick Garland puts them on the domestic terrorist list. Mark Houck, who's a fellow Roman Catholic, he defends his son by putting his hand out, and some snowflake death squirt at Planned Parenthood falls over and then wants to sue the guy. Nothing happens to him because there's no legal basis. And then Merrick Garland sends in a couple of dozen SWAT agents to arrest him. Joe, it's already here. It's already, and then he's got the nerve, Merrick Garland, to get up in front of the Senate, in front of Ted Cruz and Hawley, who pressed him on this issue, and said, "You got a beef with Roman Catholics?" He says, "Not that I know of, Senator." Well, what do you mean, not that you know of? You're the Attorney General of the United States. But this is the world we live in. Let's pivot for a second. Let's pivot to Ron DeSantis. Okay, let's play a clip from him because I don't know. I want to play this for everybody out there who's listening to us at the front line with Joe and Joe because I don't know where to go with this show. So let's play the clip, and I really want your comments about this.
Whole special district. Walt Disney Corporation obviously owns a lot of it, but the district owns other land. And, quite frankly, I wasn't even thinking about that land. This was not something that was really important one way or another. We just wanted them to live under the same rules, pay the debt, pay the taxes, all that stuff. Oh, but come to think of it, now people are like, well, what should we do with this land? And so, it's like, okay, people have said, maybe have maybe create a state park, maybe try to do more amusement parks. Someone even said, like, maybe you need another state prison. Who knows? I just think that the possibilities are endless. And
I'm going to tell you, Joe Resinello, what my problem is with Ron DeSantis. It strikes me, please, I could be wrong. Okay, so let me be clear. I could be wrong. He strikes me as a victory lap type of guy. And I've never really liked guys who take victory laps. Trump, to a degree, is the same way. They like to take a victory lap. My view is this. If you want the leader, now I'm going to support either one of these guys if they get the Republican nomination, okay? But what I really like to see is somebody who just does what they have to do and shuts up. Joe, you remember the story of ancient Rome? You remember the character Cincinnatus, the historical character Cincinnatus? So he was a leader of Rome back way before the Republic, okay, when they were fighting off all the different tribes in Italy. And he was a general, and he was plowing his fields, and the senators in Rome came to him and said, look, we're being threatened. We need help. Could you please come out? Can you help us? You'll have all the power you want. Just come out and help us. And Cincinnatus put down his plow, and he went out and he served. He served his society. He served Rome, okay? And what did he do after that? They offered him all sorts of power, okay? After he successfully defeated, I forgot it was the Acqui or the Nervi or one of the Italian tribes, okay? And then he went back to his plow. To me, Cincinnatus is an example of true leadership. I don't have to beat my chest. I don't have to go like this, like Donald Trump or DeSantis, okay? I'm going to do what I got to do to stay true to what it is I ran on. I'm going to fight for the people I said I'm going to fight for, and then I'm going to shut up and go on to the next issue. Joe, where am I wrong in all of that
Well, you're
diatribe?
right, but that's a rare person because very few people are that virtuous. Again, it comes down to where's your kingdom. I mean, virtuous people who basically are not living for this life or living for the next life, viewing it as far as the long game, might do that. Most people don't roll that way. They just don't. Even the best of people don't roll that way. But getting back to like DeSantis in that clip,
Mhm.
and that's sad, Joe. That you're 100% right, but you talk about a very small group of people are that virtuous. Sadly.
Well, let me ask you a question real quick. Would you now again? Our founders were not Roman Catholic, obviously. Okay, they obviously were mostly Christian men. At the very least, they had a Christian world view. Okay, um, I think many of them were virtuous men. I think George Washington
Oh,
was
he's
a
very virtuous.
virtuous man.
Very, very, actually. I
See,
think
he
that,
didn't
yes.
want the accolades. He really did not want. He truly didn't want them. Okay, he fought for his country. Is what he did. He was willing to die for his country. He was the father of his country. George Washington is the father of this country. I don't care what Hannah Nicole Jones has to say or any of the leftist radicals. George Washington is the father of his nation. Okay, George Washington was a humble man. George Washington didn't rub things in people's faces. George Washington did what was right and then moved on. But I don't see that quality. And I would go out to, I don't want to say all, I'm sure there's maybe one or two out there, Joe, but most of the people that we would look up to, there are Clarence Thomas, in my view, is the closest that comes to that.
Clarence Thomas is a national treasure, if you ask me.
Yes.
I like in all honesty,
And he's got that quality that I'm talking about.
a national treasure. Um,
And that's why they're attacking him, by the way. That's why
oh,
they're
there's
trying to
no
tear him
question
down.
about it. But that's another story for another day. As far as DeSantis, though, this clip I get from this is he's using leverage. He's basically saying we have land next to Disney, and he was joking about it. We'll put a prison on there to make your clients, i.e., kids, not want to go to Disney.
Right.
And the thing I like about this is that's what you have to do. You see, there is no more. You talk about virtue, shaming someone. Oh, shame on you. No, they don't care.
Well, there's
What
no more
they
shame nowadays.
understand is leverage.
Right.
You have to attack the bottom line. Money. You have to basically say, you're going to do this. I am going to financially destroy you. I'm going to take away all your tax breaks. I am going to make your existence, Disney, in Florida, a misery until you change. You see, I got news for you. That's what corporations do. I've been involved in corporate America for 25 years this July. It's financial violence. That's how it's basically just that. It's violence. I am going to make your life miserable until you comply or you
Right.
leave. And that is what he's doing. And that's what, if you want to really change things, that's what people have to do to these people. You take
Let
like
me
the
ask you
Bud
this.
Light thing. Don't buy Bud Light. And
Don't buy
here's
Bud
another
Light. No,
thing.
and it has cost him.
But don't go back.
See that now you're speaking my language. Stop thinking that boycotts end. If you really want to make an example out of any of these corporations, what you have to do is pick one. I don't care if it's Netflix.
Whatever.
I had this conversation with Bill Donahue the other day. By the way, everybody, that's going to be airing Tuesday on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, and then we're going to put it out. We encourage everybody to go out and buy Bill Donahue's book on virtue and the attack on virtue. That is the thing, Joe Rossinello. Along the lines of what you're saying is when you do these things, okay, like you're talking about DeSantis going and pushing back against Disney, let's say. But on another level, we also need the federal government coming down on BlackRock. And I want your opinion on this. You're still on Wall Street. I was there years ago. Thank God I got out. And BlackRock is a company that's completely woke, but they're not one company. They control $1 trillion in assets. They buy up stakes in these companies, and then they tell these companies what to do. So even if you went into the board of directors of any of those companies, they're going to say, well, we're being told what to do by a majority shareholder in BlackRock because they own 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 50% of our company. They have a plurality of the shares, and they're coming in here telling us we got to do this, 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 and this. Here, and I guess there's a larger question, Joe. What do we do about BlackRock and State Street and the other big what do you call them? Private equity companies that really are just writing the rules, and they got a lot of power and a lot of money, Joe.
Well, a lot of that comes from the World Economic Forum, what's called ESG, environmental social governance. We're
Mhm.
seeing that basically used across the world. We're seeing that in America. We're seeing that in Canada. We're seeing that in Europe. If you ask me, that is the new totalitarian state. It's basically using leverage for countries to get around their own constitutions through corporations, governments partnering with companies. You
Right.
use some financial ones. We've seen that during the elections. Facebook admitted what they did. They
Right.
admitted it. And that is the problem. That's ESG. Governance, that's the G. Using first, remember, these people are climate cult followers. All things climate, which means get rid of fossil fuels, which means the middle class get destroyed.
Right.
Period. End of
You
story.
get rid of fossil fuels, you are accomplishing what Barack Obama wanted to do, which is exactly what they're doing in San Francisco, exactly what they're doing in Los Angeles. It's exactly what they're doing in Chicago and New York. They're chasing out the middle class. They're chasing out the middle. They want exceedingly rich and exceedingly
Well, there it
poor.
is. Because people who are exceedingly poor are easy to control. And that is
We
a
are
fact.
not, though, and that's why we're always the
Well, that's
problem.
right. And that's why what you're seeing in Canada, he's saying, "Oh, I'm going to give you a rebate." That just makes you a slave.
Right.
I'm going to give you a little bit of money just so you can exist. You could eat some rice, some beans. You could have meat 4 times a year.
Four
You can
times a
exist,
year.
you can exist, but you're a slave and I can
Right.
control you because I control how you eat. Ultimately, that's what that's about.
That's right.
Destroy, but then there's the social part. It's all the other stuff, the woke stuff. But
LGBT.
how they do it is through companies. The
Right.
companies are the weapon. And that's how they're getting around the Constitution.
Hey Joe, listen, I had to sit there when I worked in New York City, and I had to look at the compliance modules, which in the restaurant industry is usually like PCI compliance, alcohol service compliance, normal things. Don't serve somebody who's too drunk, things like that. Okay. When I worked in New York, and everybody knows I'm in Arizona now, when I worked in New York, smack dab in the middle of that, Joe, is exactly what you're talking about. I had to listen to the New York City mandated module on LGBT affirmation. I had to sit through it. I had to, listen to it. They don't let you fast forward through the modules. And that was de Blasio was the mayor at the time. You will listen to it. I don't care if you don't want to hear it. You will listen to it. That's what the left is all about. That's what they're trying to ram down our throats. And it's mandatory. Now, do I have to actually live that crap out? No. But the point is they could say, yeah, but I made you listen to that, didn't I? I forced you I coerced you through the force of law to have to listen to what I want you to hear.
Well,
And
it's
believe
going
me,
to get
that
even
matters.
it could even get worse than just listening to. And that's what ESG is about. And that's you're talking about BlackRock and such. That's the leverage. And frankly, if you ask me, the World Economic Forum, they should be imprisoned.
Oh,
They are literally, that is, like I said, that is the tyranny that's existing now on the earth, masked. All these fancy people that go to Davos that basically are, if you ask me, going to destroy middle class people. They're already doing it. They're doing it in Europe. They're doing it in Canada, and we're just starting to they're doing it in Australia. We're just starting to get a taste of what's going to happen.
Well, we
But
got to,
people, Joe, they're blind to it. They say, "Oh, that's conspiracy. You're crazy." No, sorry,
no,
I'm
it's
not.
not. It's not
I have
conspiracy
my
when the Justice Department goes after men who are trying to protect their daughters from these perverts in locker rooms and bathrooms. That's not conspiracy theory. They could call it conspiracy theory all you want. Joe, my hand to God, I have a young boy. I don't have a daughter. Okay. I'm not letting a woman who thinks she's a man go into the bathroom while my boy is in there. This is not just a matter of protecting our daughters. This is a matter of protecting our kids, boys and girls. I don't want my son exposed to this nonsense. I do want to say this, though, on a different note. Laura's in the chat room, good friend of the show. Laura, thank you always for being here, along with Mr. Buzz, everybody else. Well, you know we all love you. Laura says, cowards, Joe, I love for your comments. Cowards always go after the weak first, but blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Joe, perhaps I guess I'm taking that Laura posted, I'm asking you this question. Perhaps, at least to a certain degree, we're all meant to go through this. No, it's because this is very difficult to fight against. It's very, as human beings without grace, we can't fight against any of it. Okay. But perhaps we're the poor in spirit. But as our Lord tells us, ours is the kingdom of heaven. I mean, again, I love to straighten out the things in this world. But maybe we do what we have to do, but don't hang all our hopes on it, because this world is never going to be straightened out, ever.
Well, it never was, but ultimately, I mean, all things, again, this is kind of like a religious angle on it, but all things are to lead us to God. Personally, I think a big problem, you talked about Africa, while Africa is still holding on to traditional ideas, they have their problems. Let's not pretend like Africa is paradise. They have a lot of problems. But that's not one of them. Why?
Right.
Because they're poor. You see, America, Europe, Australia, Canada, we're not. And believe me, we don't know what financial suffering is like when you look at what goes on in other countries.
Joe, that's our problem.
That is the problem. And that's why you talked about the godly aspect of it. You see, God's goal is for all people to get to heaven, not necessarily to thrive. You see, we don't look at the world the way we should, people, because their kingdom is here. The goal of life, to be honest with you, is to become holy and get into heaven. That's every single soul that you've ever seen and ever will see. We come from God, we live to serve God, and we're supposed to be there in heaven. And you don't just float in. This is just going to purify people, but it'll be a lot of suffering.
Well, Joe, and that's the thing too. I mean, let's face it; these people have a lot of power, and there are things we could do about it. It takes time. We have to actually step up. Like I said, I had this conversation with Bill Donahue the other day. We got to, and we've been saying it since we've gone on the air. The greatest counter-revolutionary act you could commit right now is to get up and speak the truth. That is the revolution or the counter-revolutionary act, because the revolutionary act that they propose is to keep perpetrating lies and lies and lies. Now, one of the biggest liars there is Representative Jayapal. Joe, in my heart, as a Roman Catholic, I have to confess to you, I do not like this woman. I don't like her. I haven't liked her since she's come on the scene. She's one of the crew of AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Presley and Omar. She is an annoying, hard leftist. She's not a liberal. She's a hard leftist. John, play the clip.
Needs immigrants to survive. Immigrants pick the food we eat, rebuild our communities after climate disasters, help construct our infrastructure, power our small business economy, clean our homes, and look after the most precious in our families, our children and our elders.
I'm so embarrassed.
She said, we need more brown people to clean our toilets, says the elitist Democrat Congresswoman.
Right.
Imagine if that were MTG or
That's
Matt
right.
Gaetz. They'd be done.
They'd go crazy.
Carolyn,
yeah. And so
your
yeah,
reaction
sometimes you just
to
have
that.
sometimes you just have to listen to their own words, right? I mean, they tell you exactly how they feel.
You see, Carolyn there is exactly right. They tell you, Joe. And this is what I mean about Republicans. Stop making excuses for these people, please. When they step in it, you need to drive them down even further into the muck that they've created for themselves. Don't let them out of it. Joe, remember, you're an Iron Sheik fan, okay, going back in the day. All right. If Iron Sheik had somebody in a full Nelson on the mat about to pin them, is he going to let them out or is he going to pin them? What is he going to do?
No, the Sheik's pinning you.
He's pinning you because he's the Iron Sheik, okay? Now, my larger point is this. Don't let them out. Hold her words. Hold her to her. Jayapal is one of the typical leftists who want to call everybody racist. First of all, aside from all the lies she told in that little clip, they clean our homes. That sounds awfully racist to me, okay? So we need brown women, really is what she's saying, to come from the border, Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, wherever they come from, because they clean our homes. They rebuild our cities after climate disasters. Hurricanes that have been going on since the creation of the world, that have been hurricanes, Jayapal. It's not a climate disaster. It's not man caused by man. It's caused by nature. There are hurricanes. And by the way, what happens is municipal workers, along with the private sector, mostly men who do heavy lifting for a living, they're the ones who rebuild dikes in New Orleans and they rebuild cities after tornadoes and hurricanes. So that's another thing. But here's the point. Do you see her pandering? Do you see her lying about all these things and then pandering and then being just blatantly racist? And here's the larger question, Joe Resinello, please help me out because my brain's falling out tonight, as my mother would say. Why doesn't anybody call her out in a significant way for the nonsense that she spills along with the rest of them? Why do we let them get away with it?
Well, where's MSNBC on that one? Where's The View on that one? Because they don't care, because they have no integrity. None. If you're being like none, zero.
Right.
That was such a racist comment.
Right.
And also, she's telling the truth. Let's be honest. The only reason why the borders are open is because they want votes. That's why you don't have to show ID anymore, people.
Right.
That is why there are mail-in ballots in many states. Why, at this point in time, you have to have a mail-in ballot? Now, there is no more COVID issue. It's not an issue. Biden in May is taking away. It's no longer like on the radar from a federal perspective. Please tell me why that there are states that vote through mail-in ballots. Why? Why? It's right. No, it's not. No, it's not. I want every legal citizen to vote, whether you're Jewish, Catholic, an atheist, Black, Hispanic, Asian, but it's not about that.
Can I cut you off there, Joe?
Sure.
Can I cut you off? The reason why what you just said is true is because there is the majority of every group you just mentioned, I would say. Okay, maybe a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, there is a vast amount of people in every group you just mentioned that would vote against the crap that's proposed by the left. They don't want straight up democracy or
because
they
they'll
don't
lose,
want a
Joe.
constitutional republic where all
They
groups
lose.
take, let's say, for argument's sake, a group like atheists. There's a good example. There's a lot of atheists, okay, who also believe in natural law. All right. They don't believe in God, but they believe in some form of the natural law, some form of right or wrong based on a natural instinct for what's right or wrong. I'm not saying I agree with it, but having said that, they're not into all this BS. You get a lot of atheists who would turn around and say, no, my little daughter's my little daughter. I still respect biology. I might not believe in God, but I believe in science. I believe my little girl's my little girl because she's my little girl. I believe my little boy's my little boy because he's my little boy. Joe, that guy who does not believe in God will be in front of that school board as fast as you or I if they try to indoctrinate
no
or
doubt.
groom our children.
Because this is about power, Joe.
Right.
That's
my point.
You see, but people don't see that. Like, this is not about equity. It's not about justice. This is about power. And many of these people see that now they have basically a seat at the table. And whether it's right or wrong, they don't care. What do I mean by right or wrong? Voting, i.e., you have to be a citizen. That doesn't make me a racist. You have to have a tax ID, i.e., you pay taxes. If you're not paying taxes, you can't vote.
Right.
You have to be a citizen.
Right.
And that's that is why what she just said, they don't care about these people. I said that 5 years ago when we started this show. What she just said validated what I said 5 years ago. Could care less about those people. There's one reason why they care about them. That's the new voting plantation.
Right. I want to say this just to chime in, Joe, because we're coming up on the hour. I work, obviously live in Arizona. I work in the restaurant industry. Okay. She has no clue. Somebody like Jay Appel, I'm sorry. Well, you know what? We said we're not going to call people names on this show anymore. And I've been mostly guilty of that. So I won't do it. Okay. She's misguided. She's a liar. You want to know something? You know who's against who favors a secure border? The people I work with who are from south of the border. Joe, you can imagine, especially now in New York, it was the same. Here, it's even more so. Okay. I work with Mexicans. I work with so many people who came across that border. Those guys want that border secured. You know who I work with? I work with men who started as busboys, then became barbacks, now bartenders, making 110, 120 grand a year, coming from some south of the border, yes, S-hole, okay, that they couldn't make a living in. And you know what they want? They want people to come here legally just like they did. And that's what somebody like Jay Appel doesn't understand. Because what I just gave you is an example from reality. That's the reality. Jay Appel lives in a world that's detached from reality. Oh, they're just some wonderful people fleeing oppression. All right, save that for your liberal focus groups. We're in the real world. And the reason why I brought up the people I work with is because, Joe, they're against this too. And they're from the places that a lot of people are coming across the border from illegally.
So it's all about votes. I mean, that's what people don't. And frankly, shame on the Republic. They should call as clearly as I just called it out. They don't.
Joe, let me ask you a question. We got to go. You just said call it out. As of right now, we'll mark the date. Okay, our producer will help us mark the date. It is around 10, a little after 10 Eastern time on the 23rd. I'm going to say this right now. Right now, the only person I could see actually taking mostly our side is Donald Trump. And as of this moment, I'm going to be supporting him in the primary. And if he wins, of course, I'm going to be supporting him in the general. What say you?
Oh, dude, I'm voting for Trump all the way. Joe, he's up by 35 points right now.
But aside from the fact that he's in the lead, do you feel, because this is really what my genuine concern is, do you really feel, because I do,
you see, Trump will take a grenade to the government. What do I mean by that? He'll tear down a lot of the corruption. I don't think DeSantis will take it as far.
Right.
And frankly, I think it has to be done to that degree. I think you have to gut the what's it called? The FBI. You have to gut the Department of Merrick Garland, Department of Justice. You have to gut the schools, the education.
Right.
And he'll do stuff like that. DeSantis, I don't think it'll take it to that extreme. We'll see what happens. I mean, I'll be honest with you. The way that the voting laws are set up, as in it's legal, the law, drop boxes, ballot harvesting, mail-in ballots, no ID, Republicans can't win.
Well,
doesn't matter who runs, can't win.
Well,
and until Republicans address that, to be honest with you, that's your number one issue.
Well, I don't know why they're talking about, Joe, I got to be honest with you. I don't know why they're talking about other issues. If those things are, I live in Maricopa County. I'm not saying anything before you take us down, YouTube. I'm not saying anything was fraudulent. But according to the law, you have ballot harvesting.
No, it's the law. This is not
the law that's the problem.
I'm talking about this is legal.
Right, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan,
the law
in
is
Georgia.
It's not just. And until that's addressed, well, that's why DeSantis won in Florida by 20 points. He fixed the law.
Right.
And here's the thing. They know that because if that was not in place, they get crushed.
Well, Florida
And that
showed
is and shame on the Republicans, Joe. That's why I say they're in on it. They're part of the problem. If that is your number one deal, the law, you cannot vote through the mail because there's no reason for it. You have to
right.
show ID. It has to be paper ballots. No more ballot harvesting. No more drop boxes. You do that, we have a safe, sound, and solid election. People have a voice. Until then, people, there is no voice. And sadly, the country's going to continue to go down the sewer.
Well, listen, sometimes, it's like the phoenix rising from the ashes, Joe. Rome fell. I always talk about that. Rome fell. And then the Catholic Church, primarily, they built Western civilization on those ashes, on those ruins. And there's no reason to believe. I would love America to be the place that I grew up in. It's not the place you grew up in. We lived in some tough times in the 1970s. I loved my country. I still love my country. I don't like what it's become. And I think we got to continue the fight. And that's why I asked you about right now. For me, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. Trump's my guy right now. And no Republican has been, forget about the left. They hate Trump and they hate DeSantis. They hate them all. So I'm not listening to the left. As far as the Republicans are concerned, and let's stay here for a second because we just got a comment from Jim Barron I want to comment on. But as far as it goes, I'm with right now Donald Trump. Vivek Ramaswamy, Jim, my problem with him, very quickly, we're not going to belabor the point and get into a whole other topic. Vivek said he didn't agree with Ron DeSantis on going after Disney, which shows me he may be somebody that bows to the altar of the free market, that does not want government intervention at times into the free market. And Vivek criticized DeSantis, said, well, I wouldn't have done that. Why? The left uses the government all the time. Why can't we? And Ron DeSantis, to his credit, he punched Disney in the face. So I'm not with Vivek on that. And as far as RFK Jr. is concerned, let me tell you something. There's a lot that I could in good conscience vote for RFK Jr. I tried Googling his position on abortion, which I could not find. But if my suspicion is correct and he's pro-abortion, I'm not voting for him. I can vote for him if he was running against Bernie Sanders, because I suspect he's probably for some restrictions on abortion. But I'm not voting for him against Donald Trump, who is pro-life. I like RFK Jr. He bucks the trend in his family and in the Democrat Party, okay? But he's pro-abortion at the end of the day. So I'm skeptical on Vivek, and I'm a little skeptical on RFK. Joe, I'll give you the final word on that.
Well, we'll see where it goes. I think, again, getting back to the voting laws, they have to be addressed. There's no reason for mail-in ballots. There's no reason why people shouldn't be mandated to show ID. Paper ballots, because you can't, there are no irregularities and or technical issues with computers. And it can be done, and it can be done in one day. Let them call you anything and everything because you hold that position. That doesn't make me a racist. That makes me logical, and I want a fair election for all citizens. If you're here illegally, sorry, you can't vote. And that's all I have to say. And once that gets fixed, to be honest with you, we start taking the country back to the people. But until that doesn't get fixed, forget it. It's over. Party's over.
I agree with you. My mother came to this country in 1964 and she couldn't vote until 1972. Guess why? Because that's when she became a citizen, 1972. And you know what? If it's good enough for my mother and all the immigrants that came here who had to go through the process, well, then it's good enough for you. There's nothing unjust, unfair, racist, or anything else the left likes to say about that. It's a matter of basic fairness and basic justice. Thank you all out there for joining us here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. You know as well as I do, we don't ask you for money, but what we do ask you for is help us out with the algorithms. Share if you like. If you like us. If you don't, I don't know what to tell you. But if you like us, please share our videos on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook. Okay, like us on Twitter and Facebook. Follow us on Twitter and YouTube. Anything you could do that would take you about all of 3 seconds to do, help out Joe and Joe, and we really appreciate all your support up to this point. You see Charity Mobile on the screen. Please look at the Charity Mobile. All the proceeds or part of the proceeds go to support pro-life causes, okay? So we thank you all again for joining us here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe going into the breach on Sunday night. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon. Tired of doing business with companies who don't share or support your beliefs? Then you need to switch from your current phone company to Charity Mobile. Charity Mobile is the pro-life phone company. 5% of your monthly plan goes to support the pro-life, pro-family charity of your choice. There are no contracts, and Charity Mobile makes it very easy to switch. Act now, because for a limited time, new customers who mention the offer code Joe and Joe get a free phone with free activation and free shipping. Chat with us online at CharityMobile.com or call us at 877-474-3662.